take it away.
Okay, so this is a really interesting time to be doing this because there's so much going on in the world right now, not just coronavirus, but all the civil rights issues and so on. And it's a time when we're really looking at rights uh, in another way. We have in many ways. And, I used to say, we're on the edge of tomorrow, and the tomorrow used to be in response to polio and the eradication of polio. Now our tomorrows, there's so many things. We have to eradicate coronavirus. We have to eradicate civil rights issues. We have so many things we have to do. But polio is still the number one event in Rotary until we got eclipsed by coronavirus. And an interesting thing to know is that this past week, Nigeria is now declared polio-free. So there are only 2 countries. Yeah, there's a little reaction box down there at the bottom, and we can clap in it. There we go. There are only 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and of course, there are war zones that still have polio. But in addition to eradication of polio, our tomorrow has also seen the acceptance of women in Rotary. It's beyond its silver anniversary. Okay, it's 30-something years, 33 years. So some of you may remember when all of this started in Rotary. Some of you may not even know that there was a time when women couldn't be members of Rotary. I knew because I was invited by Superintendent Richard Key, who is our superintendent of schools, to join Mary Lou Elliott, another principal in the district, in the ex-Rotary Club of Doherty, and we'll tell you about that. But what I knew about Rotary then could have been loosely written on the head of a pin. I didn't know much about Rotary. I knew about Kiwanis. Do you know what Kiwanis means? Anybody know? It means waiting to get into Rotary. I didn't make that up. Somebody in Kiwanis told me that. And I say that with apologists, Kiwanians, who do the same kind of good service that we do. But I also knew about elks. They wear those interesting hats. And lions, because I was a school person, and lions provide eyeglasses for the kids in school. But I literally had never heard of Rotary. Apparently not an uncommon occurrence. But I knew that in my school district, they were locked into this fight with Rotary International. So what I'll do is tell you a little bit about the legal wrangling and some of the funnier, and I can laugh now, some of the funnier and more interesting experiences that I've had, and some of the really key things. So Duarte is a little bedroom community in the San Gabriel Valley. It's home to the renowned City of Hope Hospital, that very good cancer hospital. And of course, the Duarte Unified School District. And in that little town was a small club, struggling as we do to raise membership. And I want you to remember that what I said we were doing was struggling to raise membership. That was our huge issue at the time. The issue wasn't to get women involved. The issue was to grow the membership of the club. So the year was 1976, and the superintendent of schools, who's the one who should have all the credit for this action, he looked around at his community and he saw these manager types. Back then in the 70s, there were all manager types in Rotary. There was a principal, a reporter, a psychologist, perfect for rounding out the Rotary classification system. Remember that? We used to have classification system. But they were all women. And Richard thought, why not invite these women to join Rotary? So he called the district governor and he confided his plan and he asked what he thought. Now, I won't tell you the district governor's name because he didn't pass the 4-way test. And I'll tell you why. He said, I think that's a great idea, Richard, But when you send in their names to international to register them, don't send in their full first names. Just send in their initials, so nobody knows whether they're men or women. S. Whitlock, M. Elliott, and so on. And we'll just send them in. And of course, that didn't pass the that really didn't pass the four-way test because it was designed to deceive. There was only one member of the club who objected to what the club was doing and really wasn't interested in getting women. And you have such a member in your club. He could foresee the death of the club because he was the local undertaker. And he said, no, I don't think we should do this. I'm going to resign from the club. And so he resigned. Everyone else stayed. And of course, the women entered wholeheartedly into the spirit and the work of Rotary. They held yard sales. They made snow cones for the city picnic. They made breakfast with the Easter Bunny, all those things that we can't do anymore. They had breakfast with Santa Claus. They made Thanksgiving baskets for needy families. And we also made dinners for cancer survivors. They also got busy planning their first event, which was the 25th anniversary of the club. So the celebration was set, and everything was in place, and the international representatives planned their recognition of this milestone as they do for all club members. They send representatives to your clubs to help you to celebrate or observe these events. So at the festivities, while the representatives were there, the Duarte women were introduced. To the palpable consternation of the international representative, the buzz was obvious. There are no women in Rotary. And somebody said, yeah, in this Rotary there are women. Well, the representative returned to Evanston after the party was over. And he reported, can you imagine? There are women in the Duarte Rotary Club. And headquarters lost no time in sending a message to Duarte saying, women are not allowed in Rotary. The women need to be asked to leave. And if they do not leave, you have to stop calling yourself a Rotary Club. That's just three things. Women are not allowed in Rotary. They have to be asked to leave. If they don't leave, you have to stop calling yourself a Rotary Club. So the club took a vote and decided that it would appeal to the board of directors. But it was told it had to be a real Rotary Club if it wanted to appeal to the board of directors, and it couldn't be as long as the women were members. So they thought, okay, we'll appeal to the Council of Legislation, which was meeting that year in Tokyo. So one member, our Mr. Rotary, was chosen to take the issue to Tokyo. But it was an interesting situation, however, in that when the issue came up for consideration, it wasn't whether women should be permitted to be members, but whether the Rotary Club of Duarte had violated Rotary bylaws by inviting women as members. That was the issue. That was before the council. And of course, the answer was clear. The die was cast, and the vote against having the club retain its women was 1,000 to 34. There were actually 34 delegates at COL who were sympathetic to the issue. And I met one of them in Calgary in the 80s. You remember when the convention was in Calgary. I was on a train riding down to the convention center, and I was sitting across from a man and his wife, and we were all, tagged for Rotary. And you know how you like to read people's tags and see where they're from. And the gentleman looked at my tag and he said, Duarte, are you from the club that tried to get women in Rotary? And of course, never in Rotary, right? And I said, yes. He said, well, I was at the Council on Legislation, and I thought that there should be women in Rotary. I thought there always should be women in Rotary. And his wife, his really sweet wife sitting next to him said, I didn't think so then, and I don't think so now. And I thought, why? And she said, you know why? Because our husbands are going out to Rotary meetings at night, and we don't want them meeting in clubs with women. And she went on and on. And you need to know that there were a lot of women who objected to have their husbands be in clubs that included women. But here's a little bit of information that's not circulated very widely. In the 1950s in Detroit, a club from India had put an item to change the bylaws about women on the agenda at the COL. It was defeated and the club didn't press it. They were really not pushing at it. And even more interesting, the first Rotary Constitution didn't specify that Rotarians had to be men. Just persons, it said, persons of good character. But that was a time when there were few women in the workaday world. And because men were the ones engaging in, fellowship and business activities, the bylaws just kind of morphed. They just evolved into men of good character. If I could ask Paul Harris a question today, and I did when I went to Evanston and I saw his larger-than-life figure in the Paul Harris room, I said, would you have intentionally excluded women from Rotary? And he didn't say a single word, didn't answer. But Jack Davis, who was the president of Rotary International at the time, said, the unity of Rotary International was jeopardized by the unilateral move of the Duarte Club. So, International sent a representative to Duarte to tell us that our charter would be removed. They came to a meeting at the coffee shop and they asked to have the charter, and they removed the charter of the club. And so, we kind of looked at each other and we said, okay, so where do we go from here? And Bill Brooks, who was a Rotarian for a long time, said, that's okay. We'll just put an X over the Rotary icon and we'll call ourselves the Ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. See if you can see this. Can you see this pin? It's a Rotary pin with the X over it. This is why we were the Ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. So we became the Ex-Rotary Club of Duarte, and we remained the Ex-Rotary Club of Duarte for 11 years. Okay, 11 years. Now, I think often about this, that for 11 years, there were men in Evanston who objected to having women in Rotary. And I keep thinking, now if they had a daughter who was 15 when this started, she was 26 by the time this was settled. And you watched her grow up in a world that thought women were just second best. Did you ever think about what you were preparing for that daughter who was growing up during those 11 years? I don't know. Jack Davis, I said, we jeopardized the unity of Rotary International. So we became the Ex-Rotary Club of Duarte, and this was the club into which I had been invited. So a Rotarian from a neighboring club, from the Arcadia Club, Sanford Smith, said, I think we can take this case to court. Remember what I said our issue was. Women, membership. So as we prepared to take it to California courts, Rotary petitioned that the case be heard in federal court. But the reason, it said, not all members of the board of directors are Californians, but you see, there had been a precedent in federal court where a New York club had been seeking exclusionary rights for private club membership. The federal court, however, ruled that the case should be heard in the California court. So it was first heard by the California Superior Court, and that court upheld Rotary's right to expel the club. And we were in shock, because we didn't think this could happen, because we were only looking at one side of this issue. So, with the help of the ACLU, the Seattle Five, that was a club up in Seattle they filed an amicus brief because they were trying to get women in Rotary also. With their help, Sanford appealed to the California Appellate Court. But he did some homework, and he found out that in California, as in many other states, there is a law that bans discrimination in public accommodations. railroads, telephone service, that kind of thing. And Rotary was deemed to be public accommodation because of the classification system and the fact that 80% of their members at that time had their dues paid by their employers. And so the Unruh Act, authored by Justice Unruh, the Unruh Act was the basis of that appeal. And the California Appellate Court ruled against the Superior Court. That ruling was reversed immediately. And so Rotary International, this is another ruling. Rotary International, immediately appealed to the California Supreme Court, which refused to hear the case. And of course, this was really affirming the decision of the appellate court. And now the decision was incumbent on all California Rotary clubs, but only California. Remember, this is a California decision. And so we moved on. However, before women, things changed very slowly. And this was the year in which I was a president-elect. And as all president-elects are, I was invited to attend PETS. And I received a postcard that's sent to everyone, inviting them to PETS. And I was reminded to bring my coat and tie because directory pictures would be taken. Why would they change their postcards because there's one woman out there? So I took my coat and tie. And I was the only woman there with 290 men in Garden Grove. But the nicest thing about that proportion was that during restroom breaks, there were long lines outside the men's restrooms. And I could sashay past. This was 25 years ago, and I could still sashay into the women's restroom. There was not even one female speaker. But most of the men, I have to say, were cordial and friendly. At the section on Rotary International, there was a section like that in all PETS. I heard our incoming governor, who is now my best friend, I heard him discuss the case and tell us, this is what he said: Rotary International will appeal to the United States Supreme Court, and we have every reason to believe we will win. And he added, in direct reference to the small size of our club, it's just the case of the mouse that roared. Well, I sat there taking notes, and I made our new banner. Can you see it? Can you see it? It's the Rotary Club of Duarte, the mouse that roared. And we even made a mouse pin. We have a mouse pin with a little Rotary icon on its back. But I didn't think that in 1987, someone would be appealing a case about women's membership in the service club to the huge United States Supreme Court. And my private opinion was that it was not important enough to be heard. But that was an uneducated opinion, because what I was not looking at was the fact that this was not a membership issue. This was a civil rights issue. This was a civil rights issue. In my mind, when I thought about the Supreme Court, I thought about Roe versus Wade, that kind of issue, but also the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, that all issue. And I thought, they'll never hear us. Well, we had as big a civil rights issue in that appeal to the Supreme Court. Well, I did appeal, because as one of their attorneys so commonly put it, he said, they're forcing us to take everyone in, just like a motel. That's what he said. That's what he said. So RI's argument was that the ruling violated their First Amendment right of association. And that was the basis on which they appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court did take the case. In fact, it took the case and in 4 months, record time, handed down a ruling on that case. On May the 4th, 1987, the court found that considering the size, purpose, selectivity, and exclusivity of Rotary's membership, the relationship among the club's members was not of the intimate or private variety which warrants First Amendment protection. That's what they based it on. So writing for the unanimous court, and Sandra Day O'Connor didn't vote because her husband was a Rotarian. She didn't want any issues. Justice Powell argued that many of Rotary's activities, including their meetings, are conducted in the presence of strangers, and because women members would not prevent the club from carrying out its purposes, there was no violation of associational rights. Furthermore, he said, and this is the sentence that everything hangs on, furthermore, he said, even if there were a slight encroachment on the rights of Rotarians to associate, that minimal infringement would be justified since it serves the state's compelling interest in ending sexual discrimination. And there it was. And now the decision was incumbent on all USA clubs. And this is where things started getting crazy in my life after this issue. Because I was driving to my job as principal of an elementary school when the news came over the airways. Now remember, this came over on the East Coast, and we're 3 hours behind here. So by the time I was on the freeway when I heard this news on the radio, and we didn't expect it nearly this soon because this was just 4 months after the Supreme Court took it. And when I heard the news on the radio, I couldn't believe it. And I kept looking around wondering if anybody else was listening to that radio and did they know what was going on. Well, it took me 20 minutes to get to school. And by the time I arrived at school, I think all the media in the world were on my doorstep, including Warren Olney. Some of you may remember was the CBS newscaster. I think he's an NPR newscaster now. And he was going to do the interviews for the networks. So after we got the kids settled down, because all these cameras and things all over the place, this was at elementary school, after we got the kids settled down, the superintendent said, I think you guys need to come up here to the boardroom, and Warren Olney will be here. So we went, I left school and we went up to the boardroom. And we sat in a room with Warren and the superintendent. And we were asked many questions. Most of them directed at me because I was going to be an incoming officer for Rotary. I was going to be their president. And I was asked many questions to which I thought I gave studied and intelligent answers. But near the end of the interview, in fact, we were already on our feet, I was asked how I got selected to be president. Well, you don't ask a Rotarian that question. Okay. Because the standard response is, I must have missed the meeting. Well, in a careless and decidedly unstudied moment, I said, oh, I don't know. I must have missed the meeting. And that evening, the story was the top of the news, the first item on the news. And in spite of maybe 4 hours of copy, what did they play? My inane and embarrassing response, oh, I don't know, I must have missed the meeting. And there's the world out there saying, for 11 years we waited to hear this. I couldn't believe I did that. But I started to learn then of the capriciousness of the media. And I knew that I was going to have to adopt a more serious mode. So back at the club, we had to move our meeting place because we couldn't accommodate the press and the visitors from Germany, from Korea, from South America, everyone who wanted to come and see this club. But I learned also how to be circumscribed in any and all answers that I would give about this case. And this was also my year as incoming president, and I had to settle into the goals we had set, which at that time included Polio Plus, while the whole world was watching to see where we were going. We had some interesting telephone calls, including one that asked if the food were any better now that there were women in Rotary. And I hastened to assure them that we were not cooking. Some were decidedly less pleasant. And we didn't get a welcome back from Rotary International, but we did get a new due schedule. So when we knew, they knew that we knew. And of course, it was 2 years later in 1989, following an impassioned speech by the recently deceased Frank Devlin, who was a friend of women in Rotary. The Council on Legislation voted to accept women members into Rotary. But remember, this was 1987, 1989, and it was not until April 2004 that the Rotarian printed several articles about women in Rotary. And then I was in the centerfold, but I was in a turtleneck, black turtleneck up to here. I was advised to wear a black turtleneck for the interview and uh, fully dressed, but I was in the centerfold, which I am told is the important place to be. But Rotary has removed, finally, the last vestiges of sexist language so that now they profit most who serve the best. And even more new, a club may not be chartered unless its membership is open. The operative word is open. Open to both men and women. It doesn't have to be constituted of men and women, but it has to be open to both men and women. I think there's still a club in New Jersey that has no women because it says it can't find any capable women. So we're planning to just take a bus and go down there and join that club and see what happens. Well, it didn't start as a women's issue, but as a simple attempt to recruit more members into Rotary. And how successful has that been? Now, maybe 30% of the women in the US, 30% of the Rotarians in the US are women. A little over 20% of the Rotarians around the world are women. So there's still a lot of room to grow. Can men and women work together in Rotary? They have more than 30 years. And that was the beginning of my journey through that humanitarian organization that's Rotary. The realization of the opportunity to serve in an ever-shrinking world, the opportunity to meet men and women who can see and articulate a need and its resolution, no matter how difficult the way or how meager the resources. R.I. President Machiagbe said, women serve alongside men in every segment of life, in medicine, in warehouses, and in construction. Why not in Rotary? Why not? I was in an incredibly fortunate place when all this happened because it has brought such bounty into my life. I have served my district in many positions, including district governor position. I've had the pleasure of talking to countless clubs here and overseas who are all fascinated by this story. I can't tell you how many clubs I've zoomed to with this story in the last couple of weeks. My first makeup internationally was in the Rotary Club of Clapham in London, where I was the first woman visitor they ever had in that club, and where Queen Elizabeth and I were toasted on the same glass of champagne. Well, my small club, half men, half women, went on to sink water wells in Jos, Nigeria, the same Nigeria that's now polio-free, established an AIDS clinic in Jamaica, supported an orphanage in Mexico, support NIDS campaigns. And I can tell you, there's very little that compares with that feeling when you're on a NIDS campaign, that through Rotary, you may have saved the life of that child into whose mouth you placed those inoculating drops and contributed to the eradication of a dread disease. And all of these activities are done with the help of the Rotary Foundation. And this year, I'm going to spend my time focusing on how we can attract people to giving to the Rotary Foundation. It doesn't take much to add up to do stuff. Of course, when we succeed in eradicating polio, with the help of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and WHO and UNICEF and CDC, it will only have been the second disease wiped out from the face of the earth. The first being the dreaded smallpox. We may have to change that and include coronavirus in this. However, and in India, I have met Rotarians to whom service above self is a creed they live by daily. I worked during my year as district governor with a school that was started by Deepa Williams, a school for girls under an Education for Girls initiative. That school is now a beautiful school. It's just come through the cyclone. The school is still standing. The students are not in school because of coronavirus, but the school will prevail. I will continue my grandmother's work. My grandmother never heard about service above self. But the examples that she sent to me in her caring, thoughtful way shaped my life. My core value the same year that Dave can think was service above self, and our goal was peace through service. And I do believe that until we meet the needs of people for food, clothing, shelter, clean water, and health care, education, and all the basics, there's no place in which they can receive and absorb and respect the concept of peace. And my project was DEEPA's Project Education for Girls. But remember, we are no longer, our community is not just the residential area. We talk about Rotary working in communities. And it's not just the residential area in which we live, or the town that supports it, or even the state that governs it. We are citizens of the world, where every action, however remote or seemingly far removed, has a ripple effect on us and on all others. Listen to the news from around the world. Look at the effect it has on us. To the extent that they are well, we are well. I think of Martin Luther King's reminder to us to ask ourselves each day, what have we done to help someone? To whom much is given, much is expected. We wear our Rotary pins as ID pins, but can anyone noticing your pin tell that it says Rotary International? And if they can, do they know what Rotary International is? I fly a lot, mostly on airplanes. Oh, I used to. Airplanes. And a good way to attract someone's attention is to drop your pin on the floor in front of you. Well, unless you're a contortionist with arms 5 feet long, Simone Biles or somebody, or a Rotarian on a mission, it's almost impossible to retrieve your pin. So while you're down there scurrying around trying to pick up your pin, if somebody in the seat next to you would make a good Rotarian, he will also help you to get your pin. In the process, he will say, what are you trying to get? And explain to him what's so important about the pin and what Rotary represents. And you have told in that way at least one more person about Rotary. Give him that little brochure that says, what is Rotary? Or give him your elevator speech. Write it tonight if you don't have one. Right after you take off your Rotary pin and put it on your pajamas. Pajamas? Yeah, explain to the person sleeping next to you how important you think it is. That's why you have it on your pajamas. Well, you know what? The next day, around the water cooler or the coffee machine, I bet he would laugh, or she would laugh about the wearing of the pin. And they will say, that's because of Rotary. And that person will ask about Rotary. Bottom line is that a few more people will have heard about Rotary and may be attracted to membership. Talk about Rotary all the time. See, I'm a Rotarian who, with other Rotarians in this ever-shrinking world, will work to make it a happier place, cleaner, more self-sustaining, and more peaceful than it was when I came into it. I will support the fact that Rotary functions on the edge of tomorrow into which we can catapult aimlessly or carefully negotiate entry into. Most satisfying jobs I've had with Rotary, with young people, Delilah, with ambassadorial scholars, youth exchange students, GSE team members. Just as the time was right in the 70s for women to be included in service clubs, so it's right now for us to focus on young people, new generations, with all their energy and zeal, fine men and women of character, who in service above self will know that they profit most, who serve the best, and will wholeheartedly engage Rotary and change lives. Thank you.
As soon as I get myself unmuted, is Sylvia, thank you so much. I heard part of it. I don't recall hearing some of it, so thank you very much. Does anybody have a question or a comment you'd like to ask? You'll have to unmute yourself. Anne?
I'm curious as to what she is doing with Rotary now. Sylvia?
What I'm with Rotary now?
Yes.
I'm a member just like you are. I'm helping, okay. I'm an advisor for my president this year, and I'm working with her on building up our foundation, the Rotary Foundation, by getting members to commit to the Rotary Foundation. I work as an advisor, usually to officers who are coming in. I spend 80% of my time on Rotary things because I think it's worth the while.
I just have a comment. I attended a makeup meeting in Cocoa Beach, Florida, I guess a couple of years ago. And one of the interesting things they pointed out, and they were very proud, they had 2 women members from Germany who joined the club in Cocoa Beach because at the time they were not allowed to join in Germany. So they were
there are a lot of
very
clubs
proud.
even today, there are some clubs that are reluctant to get women, not as many as there used to be. And a lot of young people will tell you when they tried to join Rotary that there were some people who against it. But I think there is less of that now than you used to see. That people are more open to having, they know. I remember in Vancouver when the first women were invited in Vancouver, and 5 men dropped out of the club, and their jobs were replaced by 2 women. The club learned very quickly that the women would pick up the slack and get stuff done. But it was a new time, and people had to learn. But people have learned because people have looked now. They look at all the directors that there are who are women. Eventually, one day we'll have a woman president. All right, but that's not the big issue. Is not a woman president. The big issue is a good president that may happen to be a woman. So it's there.
We do have one club in far southern Missouri within our district who is an all-male club. I truly believe, I've been down there 3 or 4 times, and I truly believe they are a male club because the women want them out of the house. And this is the way to get rid of them for an evening. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It happens.
It does. We were down there 3 different times in a year and a half, and the women came out with the men. It was an awards and a social type situation. They were just floored. The people took time to visit and to bring awards and so on. In fact, one of the women, my wife's a member of our club also, and I was governor at the time, and one of them looked at Mary and said, "So when are you going to be governor?" And she looked at me and looked back at the lady and she said, "I've seen what he's doing. There's no way on earth you're getting me to do this." It has to be for the right person.
Well, you have to find the jobs that women are interested in your community.
Exactly. Carolyn, did you have something? You were unmuted. I don't know if you had something or not.
I was just going to say I really enjoyed this, and wasn't Betty Keith was the first woman in Rotary in St. Louis anyway. I don't know about Missouri or whatever.
I didn't hear Carol.
One of the ladies that we know from a former club was the first woman in the St. Louis area, and that's been how many years ago?
2 years ago.
We had our first.
I can't remember what year it was.
We had our first district governor, female district governor, Stacy Stelf, was governor in 6-7. That was the first year that we had our woman district governor. And Stacy's still very active. Her health is slowing her down some, but she is still quite active within the district and like you, advising and so on like that. So
it's really interesting. In Los Angeles, there's LA5 Club, a really high-powered club with a lot of attorneys and so on. And in the last 5 years, they've had 5 women presidents under 35.
Wow.
5 women under 35. And it can happen. I remember visiting India when they were trying to convince the Rotarians to join Rotary, and they were reluctant because they know their place, and we don't belong in clubs. And I sat and talked with them that evening, and they joined the club that night. And they're very happy as Rotarians.
Anne, I think you were either president or incoming in January of 2002. You were muted, Anne, but
You're muted.
I was past president. I was president in 99, 2000.
Okay. So Mary and I had to go our first overseas trip, and it was to Brussels, and I did a makeup in Belgium outside of Brussels, and gentlemen took me there, picked me up at the hotel, took me to the meeting, and everything was great. And they said, "Well, what about your club?" And I'd mentioned that we have X number of women. There were 3 women in this club, and it was a very large international club. The Zandvoort Club, I don't know if they're still around, but they were the airport club in Belgium and Brussels. And I said, as a matter of fact, we just had, and I couldn't remember, Am, so thank you. We had just had a woman president this past year, and all the men started to back away from me. Like, how dare you? And all the women came up like, tell me more. How did this work out? Europe is finally, I mean, there are different cultural situations within different countries.
Cultural situations, right? That's exactly
So,
right. Exactly right. So,
any other questions or comments?
well, thank you for listening to me today. Thank you for letting me come and share with you. This was good.
Sylvia, we truly appreciate it. I will forward you that email in a little bit, so you know what I tried to send to you anyway, and at least you know where it was going. So,
In the
Thank you very
beginning, she
much.
talked about a country that
Guys,
has polio free. What country was that?
Nigeria.
Nigeria?
It was just declared
Yes.
last week,
Yeah,
earlier this week. Yes.
earlier this week. Yes.
So that means all of Africa is now polio free.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, great.
So we're like Sylvia said, we're down to 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan.
They're never going to
And
give
the
up.
war is an issue there.
Yep, it is. You all take care. Have a good evening. Sylvia, thank you. Please stay in touch.
Stay safe. All of you, stay safe and stay well.
You too.
Thank you.
Take care, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.